Hello and welcome to Qtr Time podcast in partnership with Lovell Netball. I'm Lucy G.
And I'm Lucy P. And we're here to bring you all the netball goodness you never knew you needed.
At Qtr Time Pod, we are big advocates of being open when talking about periods. And so we're really pleased to say that our friends at Modibody have collaborated with Puma to launch a new range of active period underwear to keep you free from leaks, sweat and discharge when you work out, no matter the time of the month.
This active period underwear collection comes in 3 styles and a range of sizes, absorbencies and 2 colorways. If you're passionate about the planet, then you'll be pleased to know they are made from 82% recycled material.
As sponsors of the podcast, Modibody are delighted to offer our listeners an exclusive 15% discount on the collection at modibody.com if you use the code QTR Modibody. You can find all the T's and C's and the code in the podcast notes.
Go check it out. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Qtr Time podcast, being released on a Friday. Throwback to last year. Freaky Friday. We have got a pretty jam-packed episode for you this week, but before we get on to what's happening in the episode, just wanted to quickly touch on some news this week. So first up, last week we had the news that Claire Nelson is taking over as managing director of the Netball Super League. Conveniently, we're speaking to Claire Nelson today. So that's really good news. And we'll be mostly covering the life of a CEO, which is part 2 of our episode from last week. But we'll also be diving into the professionalization of the Netball Super League and the changes that are happening there and everything that's going on with that. And there's been some other news, hasn't there, Luce?
Excuse me, I just need to go and get my black veil before we discuss this news. Yes, there has been some other news. Jo Harten, MBE, has retired from international netball with immediate effect. Wow, indeed. I mean, obviously we saw her knee sort of tweaked again during the game in SSN at the weekend. So I don't know if it was wholly unexpected, but I think the fact that it was immediate effect was probably caught people by surprise. But the thing, as devastated as everyone is, I have to say, like, what a selfless move from her.
Yeah.
Because I have a fear that obviously her knee isn't right. And if she'd carried on trying to rehab and play at the same time, and obviously with the World Cup coming up, I think we would have possibly had a repeat of Com Games where maybe she wasn't necessarily fit to play. So actually she's gone, no, I'm not allowing that to happen again. I'm going to give the youngsters an opportunity to shine and really put the Roses in the best place possible and give them the best chance of winning gold. So yeah, what an absolute queen.
Yeah, it's absolute queen energy, I have to say. Yeah. And I think the clip's been circulating on social media of the Jamaica game in the Commonwealth Games.
The semi-final.
Because everyone obviously focuses on the final, winning gold, Houseby, etc. But Jo getting that rebound was the reason that we got into that gold medal match. Because if she had not, Jamaica would have gone up and they would have possibly had time to score, and then that would have been game over and it would have been so different. And she is just a big game player. You know, she wants the ball, she demands the ball. She's been instrumental for the Roses, you know, in the red dress over the years, incredible number of caps, and, you know, a contribution like that can't go unrecognised. And I hope that England Netball do enough to commemorate that legacy and everything that she brought to the game.
100%. But not only that, the other 2 clips that I've seen going around, obviously the "we want done" moment where she took herself off to give Rachel that send off,
which was her last World Cup appearance.
Yes, yeah. Gosh,
unknown at the time, yeah.
And then the other clip that I've seen, which I hadn't actually seen before, I don't think, was when she did the exact same thing with Susan Pettit for her last game for the Giants. And like she was like sobbing as she came onto court. But that just shows like what kind of person Jo Harten is, not just what kind of player she is, but what she brings to the squad as a human being. And oh man, massive loss for us, but just queen energy.
Yeah. And lots of people saying we'd like to see her coaching and back in the scene. I think she could do a Sarah Francis Bayman and get straight stuck in, you know, with a team. So fingers crossed. And obviously she's still playing for Giants till the end of the season, we know as well. So we're not losing her totally. But yeah, it was a very sad moment.
can't go cold turkey on Jo Harten. Jeez.
No. So moving on to our summaries of the Netball Super League round 13 we're on now. My goodness me, where does the time go? First up on Friday, it was Stars versus Pulse, and Pulse took the win 56-50, and I said fits and starts. It was a bit of a game of swings. I felt like the momentum changed hands a lot. And Sam Bird commented on the umpiring after the game, said there was a difference in consistency between the two umpires, resulting in a scoring end. So that could have potentially been a contributing factor. Pulse weren't super clinical in attack, exemplified by Jess Haynes getting 8 deflections, but they did do enough in defence to keep Stars at bay. It was a really strong performance from Jess Shaw, again, 35 feeds. And she's really owning that position this year. I was impressed by her. And if you think about who she was up against, I think it's still a really decent outing.
Yeah, definitely. Next up was Bath versus Dragons, with Bath taking a narrow win, 56-53. And I've said make a splash. Fully intended.
But
I mean, this game sounded like an absolute cracker. It was really even throughout. And I think these sides are actually really well matched this season. And both of them would have absolutely been gunning for the win, particularly given that Dragons beat Bath by 9 in round 3. Kadeen Corbin played a blinder. She had 27 from 28, 19 feeds and 2 turnovers. That's got to be one of her strongest performances of the season. And I think what's interesting is that out of the 11 players who took to court for Bath, 7 of them had turnovers to their name. And if you compare that to Dragons, where Shakonda had 5 and then Leighton and Jones had 1 each, they just weren't winning enough balls throughout. And that was a really stark contrast for me looking at the stats. I have to say as well, great to see Georgia Rowe back. It's the first time she's played this season and she shot 14 from 14 at 100%. Casual, as you do.
Amazing. What a legend.
Right.
Next up on Saturday, it was Mavericks versus Storm, and it was 63-51. And I said Storm going steady. It was back to winning ways for Storm, despite being pretty well pushed by Mavs for most of the game. There were, I would say, patches of greatness for Mavs, but their errors really let them down. And in the end, they did lose all 4 quarters. However, amazing to see Koshi get her first full 60 of the season. I think you could possibly tell that her match fitness wasn't quite there. She has obviously been out for quite a long time, but wowee, she made a difference for the Mavs side. She got the same number of interceptions as the entire of Surrey Storm single-handedly.
Wow.
Surrey Storm being a team that contains Amy Flanagan and Layla Guska.
And Hannah Nice, to be fair.
Yeah,
I have to say, like, I am starting to lose faith in Storm ever so slightly at this point in the season. We know that absolutely they'll make top 4, but I just feel like they're not blowing my socks off in the same way as they were at the start of the season.
Do you think they're being figured out?
Yeah, I do. And I don't know if they've got a plan B, C, D, E, F onwards to be able
like
to
some of the other
that.
teams do have more kind of impact from the bench to really mix it up, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's impact from the bench. I think it's strategic. And I just don't know. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Still a few rounds left to go. See if they can.
Well, this weekend is the game against Pulse, isn't it? So that will be a big tester. But that's at Storm's home, so they do play better at home.
Yeah, that's a good point. So first up on Sunday then was Lightning versus Sirens, with Lightning taking the win 61-45. And I said a second half blowout. For 30 minutes, we had a brilliant, exciting goal-for-goal game. But then second half, Sirens had somewhat of a brain fade, shall we say, and Lightning just absolutely dominated. It was like watching a completely different team in the second half. And Lightning went on to win it by 17 goals. I think Emily Nicol had a really quiet game, really unusual for her. There was no turnovers to her name in this one, which is unheard of for someone of her caliber. And I think Lightning were just more careful with the ball, particularly in that third quarter, and they were smothering in defence.
Yeah, totally agree. Wow, 17 goals in the second half they won by.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a game of the round.
Crazy. Yeah, I know, me too. I was priming myself, getting all ready, but Next up on Monday, the last game of round 13 was Storm versus Rhinos, and it was 65-49 in favour of Storm. And I said slow to start. Oh, Rhinos, they went down 20-8 in quarter one. And despite winning quarter four and in the second and third quarters, it was pretty close, that it was just too late. The damage was done. You just cannot go down by 12 goals in the first quarter. It's unforgivable. Yeah. Storm had 22 turnovers to Rhinos 7, including a whopping 15 intercepts to Rhinos 4. So it was interesting what you're saying earlier, but actually in this game, Layla Gusgoth single-handedly had more intercepts than the Rhinos team. Peace shot 40 from 40 in this game. SDL was on fire with 17 out of 19 and 20 feeds. It just sounds like Rhinos could not find a way to disrupt the flow in Storm's attacking end. And I know you were saying you're worried about Storm. I'm not. I'm less worried after recapping this game.
I stand by it for the time being, because look at where they are on the table. You would expect a performance like that from, I think Storm are now back top of the table to near the bottom. So I stand by what I say. And I think actually Storm have fallen down to all of the other top four teams. Am I right?
So yeah, I think so. But they've played the away fixtures, so they haven't played them at home.
Yeah,
so I think
really
that
telling.
Is a massive factor. Yeah. But it will be interesting. I think we'll know more after this game against Pulse this weekend. It's actually like Big Four, Big Dog weekend, because we've got Lightning playing Thunder and Pulse playing Storm. So it's, all happening. Unfortunately, the Thunder game isn't streamed.
Oh, damn it. Back to my Twitter refreshing.
Yeah.
But moving on to our game of the round then. So as I said, I thought it was going to be Sirens versus Lightning, but ended up going for Stars versus Pulse in the end. Now, the big difference for me in this game were the differences in the number of turnovers. So for anyone who doesn't know, in our league, turnovers is essentially the same as gains as you get in SSN. Differences that each team were able to get in terms of their turnovers. So Stars had a total of 20 intercepts and deflections combined, but only 7 turnovers, whereas Pulse had a total of 16 intercepts and deflections together and 12 turnovers. So for Pulse, the hand that they were able to get to ball was more often than not resulting in a turnover or a gain, whereas Stars were able to, I think that they're able to disrupt play because they were still getting high number of deflections, but they weren't actually able to gain possession as much as Pulse. And I think that's really
interesting. I wonder what that's to do with. I guess Pulse play quickly, like they move the ball quickly. So it's potentially more difficult for Stars to get sort of clean turnover. And also I would say that Pulse are quicker on the loose balls as well. That's something that we know that they're pretty good at, the bin chickens or whatever they're called. So that's really interesting though.
Yeah, and I think if we take a look at Stars, I think Jo Tripp. I should call her Jo Tripp. Jo Tripp did a brilliant job of rolling around the body of Cheen to really challenge her hands and her receipt of the ball. I just love to see Cheen just really start to rip some of those balls in with a little bit more aggression, because then it would just take Jo out of the game. Jo is their biggest ball winner consistently. She had a rebound, 3 intercepts and 4 deflections in this game. As you mentioned in the summary as well, Jess Shaw had another strong game. I actually don't think that Zara Everett was really able to touch her at all. Like, didn't really have much of an impact. But I think when Ratu was brought on at the start of the third quarter, the difference was pretty evident to me. Like, Stars only got 8 goals in that third quarter, which is actually their second lowest quarter score of the season. Wow. And I think that Ratu, along with that really intimidating presence of Keeble in goalkeeper, made a huge difference here. And I think if we take a look at Pulse as well, I think Chelsea Pittman had one of her strongest games of the season. She really does use her body so smartly. She's so strong. Some of the takes she had were outrageous. And in this game, she was able to provide an option through that middle channel so frequently, which then just provides them with the best option to get the ball to goal, because you've got so much choice and opportunity. Stats-wise, she only played 30 minutes, but she still had 22 feeds. So she would have been on track for 44 feeds by the end of the game, which is massive numbers.
Huge.
And I think in the second half, when she was taken off, it definitely wasn't as fluid to goal without her. But that being said, Pulse were able to put all 12 players out yet again, which I think is really impressive. But in that last quarter, I think they did suffer from not having their starting centre, wing attack or goal attack on court, because they lost that 17-12. So I think it's great to be able to have so much rotation and so many different options. But actually, I think you need sort of one of your starting attackers sort of back on court in that last bit, just to keep the ball ticking over.
Yeah, and I think it's Jade, because she is that linchpin. And I did feel that when she went off, it started to get a little bit sticky on that transition as well. Yeah. But you mentioned about Cheen. I thought she was getting a little bit rattled by Jo in this game. And the trouble with that for me is, look at Courtney Bruce, look at Jane Watson, look at Kamsamaweni, Karaka, like all of those defenders, what they do is they get in your head and they rattle. Sterling, can't believe I missed her off the list. Ooh. But that is a concern, because internationally now, with the news of Jo Harten, you've got to expect that Liv is, got one foot on the plane to Cape Town, presumably. So we need to make sure that she's developing that mental resilience against tough players, which is what you get from playing them week in, week out. So obviously playing against Jo is a massive help, and they've got some big games coming up, which will be really good for her. But just making sure that she doesn't let it get to her head, that she does remain unflappable.
Yeah, and also keep her confidence high. Like, there's a couple of times that she absolutely could have gone to post and decided to dish it off, and some of those occasions they lost the ball. There was one that Berry managed to pick up, but we need to keep the confidence high, need to keep the mental toughness high. It is a slight cause for concern, but then again, she's a baby, very young. Really. She's so young.
Moving on to our player of the round. So this week we've gone for the awesome Fran Williams.
Yeah.
She was fantastic this week. Stats-wise, she had 3 rebounds, 2 intercepts and 5 deflections. But interestingly, she had her first turnover in this game just 3 minutes into the first quarter, and then backed this up again with another turnover in quarter 2, 15 seconds into that quarter. So in terms of how she plays the game, we know that she's such a smart defender. And I do feel that in previous years, she's picked up more ball towards the end of the game when the game started to slow down. But I think in combination with Alice Harvey, she's going hunting quite early on in the game and really sets the tone, not only for her side of filling them with that confidence, but also putting the fear in the opposition. When you get those early turnovers, the other heads start to drop and they start, actually Sirens did well up until half time, as we mentioned, but I do think it's the impact of Fran just going out there all guns blazing. And she seems to be a player who's very in tune with the momentum of the game, picks up turnovers at critical moments. For example, there was at one point halfway through the first quarter, and she actually got the crucial turnover that stopped Sirens going up by 5. And them going up by 5 in the first quarter would then have given them, their tails would have been up and they could have potentially then gone on to get a bit more of a lead. She's top of the leaderboard for intercepts with 40. Oof, for comparison, Layla Gusgoth has 28.
Is Layla second?
No. Layla's about halfway down the table, but I think, in terms of just pure comparison, Fran's also second in the league for turnovers too, behind Chikwanda. I think consistently she's been extremely good this season. I've lost count of the number of player of the match awards. I tried to look back, but there's so many. It's been at least 5. And
really?
For me, she is a shoo-in for the Netball World Cup.
Yeah, I completely agree, actually. I think this is one of her best seasons yet.
Yeah.
I think her timing has improved significantly, because she'd often just be that little half second behind and then pick up a lot of whistle. And I think actually our defensive end is probably the only section on court where every single person would consistently say Mentor, Guska, Fidoju, Williams. So that she's locked herself in as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
So coming up after the break, we hear from the CEOs of England Netball and Netball Scotland, Fran Connolly and Claire Nelson.
I don't know about you, Luce, but it gets to this point in the season and all I'm thinking about is getting new trainers. When you're just eyeing them up all the way through, I'm feeling it.
Yeah, I love a bit of new stash, but I'm the type of person, I'll put all of these things into my basket, spend hours and hours looking around, but then I'll never actually go through with it. It just sits in my basket forevermore.
It's so true. I know, honestly, can relate. But luckily, Lovell Netball are offering a 15% discount on all first-time orders with code NETPOD15 at lovellnetball.co.uk. So you're sorted.
Yeah, and honestly, Lovell Netball is the place to go. Whatever you want, they've got absolutely everything.
Everything. Such a good range. Yeah.
So whether you're looking for trainers, you're looking for bibs, you're looking for supports, whatever you need.
Sports bras, all of that stuff.
Sports bras, exactly. They have got you covered. So don't forget, that's a 15% discount off all first-time orders with the code NETPOD15 at lovellnetball.co.uk.
Love a bit of Lovell. Oh my God.
Love a bit of Lovell.
Love a bit of Lovell. Happy shopping, guys.
It is absolutely fantastic to welcome the CEOs of England Netball and Netball Scotland. Welcome, Fran, Connolly and Claire Nelson onto the show. How are you both doing?
Hello, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's great. It's nice to be able to talk openly about Netball Scotland and also maybe some other things that we've been working on over these past few weeks and months.
Yeah, maybe one or two questions might come at the end about some recent news. But no, thank you both so much for coming on. I know diary management has been really tricky to get you guys, and of course Vicky Sutton, who we did last week. So this is going to be part 2 of our Life of a Netball CEO topic. So if you haven't listened to Vicky already, our lovely listeners, do check that out because it's a really brilliant episode. But we really want to dig into some of the challenges that you guys face in your roles, the sort of financial side of things, netball as a business, as well as discuss national team success and the importance of that, participation, and also, of course, the Netball Super League as well, particularly given the recent appointment of you, Claire, as Managing Director, the first ever for the Super League. Very, very exciting. In the same way as last week, we're going to include some of our lovely listener questions throughout the episode. So massive thank you to everyone who sent those in. So to start us off, we want to sort of get a sense of how you look back on both of your respective tenures so far, and also how you assess the progress of netball in recent years. So Claire, we're going to come to you first on this one, as you've been in post for the longest, having been appointed CEO in October 2015 after 2 years on the board of Netball Scotland. So a question from Sophie on Instagram: how do you compare where netball in Scotland is now compared to back in 2015?
Well, it's interesting hearing that I'm the longest serving chief exec now. I was reminded by our president last week, following the news of my new appointment, that I said that I would do 3 years. And I was like, I'll come in and I'll do 3 years and that's me. And here I am 7.5 years later, and actually still madly in love with what I do in the sport and the organisation. But that 7.5 years have been hugely challenging, but absolutely transformational for where Scotland is. I took over from a very passionate chief exec who really came in and took Netball Scotland from being just this tiny sport with a couple of thousand members and a couple of staff to being a governing body with credibility. You know, she steered them through hosting the World Youth Champs, moving into the Emirates Arena, being part of the Glasgow 2014 Games. And so for me, what I wanted to do, and I think I said this in my first speech and post, was that I wanted to really build a credible business that wasn't measured over how many medals you win, but that we could be industry leading, world leading in how we approach what we do and how we do it. So I think obviously, you know, park sirens to the side for a second, because that's been one of the most successful things that we've done and delivered as a business. Actually, you know, our sport as a governing body in a business looks completely different to what it did then. And a lot of that has been through the talent that I've been able to bring on board. So if you look at our domestic infrastructure now and our competition, our pathway, our talent pool, our people that we're building, really led by Karen Atkinson, supported by Tamsin Greenway. We're building sustainable success for the future across our national pathway. We've got a really strengthened domestic infrastructure through our local associations. Before, the governing body delivered and administrated every single bit of our sport across the whole nation, whereas now we're actually working in partnership at a local level with our universities, with our regions, with our netball development officers, heads of netball, to deliver quality opportunities to participate and develop and thrive and enjoy our sport, but they're being delivered locally. We've got great partnerships. We've got facilities being built. It's easy to talk about netball. It's easy to sell our sport in, whereas it wasn't 7.5 years ago. And I think we're absolutely respected globally. We can see where we've moved up the rankings, but actually with the talent that we have now and where we're going, we can see a really exciting future ahead. And then, of course, Sirens. When I took on the role, I didn't know that there was going to be the opportunity to join the Super League. But my passion, my drive, my vision for the sport was about commercializing it better, building a brand, engaging with women and girls, using the power and leveraging the power of a female audience to drive the sport forward, and that you could put that back then into growth and participation. And Sirens allowed us to do that. And I wanted to change the game. I wanted to show what netball could and should look like. And I think particularly through our partnerships, through our digital, through our match day, we have set standards. We've raised bars that people have followed. We have done things better than actually some of the SSN clubs. And so what I leave now is a sport that is absolutely full of potential. It's full of some of the greatest people in our sport. It's a smart business, and it's ready to go and take the opportunities that are ahead of it. So I'm really, really proud of all that we've achieved in the last 7.5 years.
I mean, I can't help but listen to you, Claire, and just feel immediately inspired. And like, Fran, before we come to you and sort of talk about your tenure as CEO to date, Claire, you mentioned there that you're incredibly passionate, incredibly driven. Where does this drive and this like strength of character and fortitude come from?
This is a question I get asked a lot, and I honestly don't know the answer to it. It's just innate, and it's in me. I genuinely believe that you have an opportunity when you have an opportunity to be a part of this world, then you have a responsibility to leave it in a better place. So that is my innate driving value. And as a woman who actually didn't have it easy growing up and has worked in very male-dominated arenas and has 3 daughters coming through, I really feel like, I have a responsibility to try and make the future better. And I keep going back to sport is the most powerful way of doing that. Look at what football has done and how it's unified. So I just have skills. I have a passion. I have a belief. And through this sport and now through this new role, I've been given this incredible opportunity to take what I know and what I believe in and try and make that future slightly better. Women's sport is not where it should be. And so it takes a lot of hard work and drive to try and make even the smallest amount of change. And so if we have that drive and that belief to be part of that change, then I have to stay committed to that mission.
I mean, I absolutely love that. And I could literally listen to you speak all day. Like if you told me to jump off a cliff in the way you've just spoken now, I'd be like,
please don't. Please don't, but please keep supporting netball and do what you do. If that's what you do, that would be amazing.
Right, done. But I mean, I find it absolutely fascinating and so inspiring to listen to. But I think that combined with what you're talking about earlier around the infrastructure that's been built, and it's kind of all those behind the scene things that a lot of people don't see, but actually huge progress has been made. And speaking of progress, Fran, you were appointed as CEO in 2019, but you've worked at England Netball in a variety of roles since 2001. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you started as a netball development officer. And then I think, did you go up the ladder? Am I right?
Do you know what? If you asked me to name all the roles I'd done at England Netball, I probably couldn't, Lucy. But you're right. I started as a regional development officer, quickly followed by a regional manager in the West Midlands. before shortly after that, what date I'm not sure of, transitioning into head office roles where I headed up capital investment, and that's really in terms of builds of new facilities. I think I headed up the coaching department, education and training, so that incorporated officiated. I did some work in the talent arena at one point, coach competition and events, and then probably about 12 years ago went into the overarching role of development director, where I continued in post for I think it was probably a decade. I might be wrong on that. It's probably about 10 years that I did as development director. And the last year of that tenure was coupled with Director of Legacy for the Netball World Cup in Liverpool 2019, and came into this role as CEO in just pre-pandemic, actually. It definitely wasn't in the job description. About 4 or 5 months pre the pandemic, took on the leadership role as CEO. So back end of 2019 now, yes.
I mean, I think that's incredible. And actually, it's incredibly inspiring to me for someone to have had so many different fingers and so many different pies and be, I think it's probably fair to say, a bit of a jack of all trades, to be so multi-talented and skilled across so many different areas. Do you think that ability to be able to span across all different departments has contributed to you becoming CEO?
Yeah, I mean, I feel incredibly privileged, firstly, to have been able to enjoy my whole career in one sport. I did a couple of roles before coming into this, but primarily the majority of my career has been in netball and at England Netball, and it's a great privilege to be able to kind of lead the organisation and the sport that you're from. And Claire and I were caught up recently and we're reflecting that actually we've had quite a similar netball journey. You know, both started university netball up in the northeast in Newcastle. Claire captained and was president of Newcastle Uni, our great rivals, because I was president and captain of Northumbria University at the same time, actually. And it was only recently we drew those connections. There's so many connections, isn't there, across our netball family that you find out years later. But I think in terms of my journey in doing those roles, pre-coming into the CEO role, and particularly pre-coming into COVID, it gave me a really good grounding and a really good understanding, and an ability, I guess, to temperature check quite easily and quite quickly how things will land. And that gives you the ability to make the decisions you need to make in this role. And sometimes they're really tough decisions. And certainly through COVID, my knowledge of the sport in every single area was tested, as it was for anyone leading any business at that point in time. And I was thankfully able to fall back on knowledge of some of those previous departments I've headed up to understand the real impact that some of the big decisions we had to make was going to have when they landed. I think also that the relationships, the partnerships you generate through those roles, coming into the CEO role, proved really critical over the last 3 to 4 years. So the connections at the netball family at regional level, at county level and at local level just gave me a huge network to be able to pull on. So when we were testing things like introduction of a modified game, there were people that I knew I could go to run ideas off. And that was both domestically in England, but also as it turned out to be across the world. We had to pull in the whole netball family. Australia, New Zealand, Isle of Man, contacts from globally helped us to develop that modified game and get our sport through the pandemic. So yeah, I was hugely grateful to have that pool of contacts to fall back on.
I always forget that actually you came in and then it was pretty much COVID. I think you were maybe 5 or 6 months into the role, which must have been, an incredible challenge. And I think it's obviously been 3 years now. Has it been 3 years now? Sometimes it feels like 10 years. Sometimes it feels like 1 year. It's really been some time now since the pandemic, but I do think we are still potentially feeling some of those shockwaves and the ripple effect really of all that happened in that massive period really of the pandemic. But in terms of other challenges that you faced, we asked the same question of Vicky last week, but we wanted to come to you for this one, Fran. What do you think is the most significant obstacle or challenge facing England netball right now?
Oh, that's a big one. And one I'd probably answer in a couple of different ways. So facing England netball, I think probably facing women's sport more broadly at the moment is the challenge of harnessing the incredible momentum that's been developed through a number of sports. Us leading the way in 2018, winning that gold medal and setting kind of netball fever alive across the nation, followed by cricket, followed by the Lionesses last summer. And I think now we're in a place where there is an opportunity, there is a moment for women's sport right now. And whichever research study you read at the moment, women's sport is cited as the area that will see a big boom. But we're yet to really see that on the ground. If I'm really honest, behind the scenes, it is still a battle to generate the money needed to grow our sport. There are very few brands putting their money where their mouth is. There's lots of people backing women's sport right now, but there's not a huge amount of money, a huge amount of brands putting the investment where they need to. But it's coming. There are far more purpose-driven brands making approaches and contacting us, knocking on our door now, than there were previously. And I think that's the key for women's sport. You have to find a brand that has a similar alignment, that absolutely buys into your vision and where you want to take your sport. So whilst it's a challenge, I think there's a huge opportunity in this time, but we have to capitalise on it. And one of the challenges that we have personally then as netball is we have the most tremendous participation base, like 3.1 million people play netball in England on an annual basis. 850,000 women and girls take to courts across the country every single week. But what we've got to do to be attractive to brands is we've got to get more of those people to show up in arenas. So we have sellout crowds, so we can move to those bigger arenas. Like our ambition in the next couple of years, in the not too distant future, is to get into that O2 and to sell record-breaking numbers of tickets. And that will be really appealing to those brands. And secondly, we have to sadly still, whilst we're in a world where traditional matrix are valued by brands, we have to drive eyeballs to our sport. And at the moment, there aren't enough people tuning in to watch the likes of our tremendous Super League. And they're more tuning in to watch the Roses play, but still not enough. Can convert some of those 850,000 that love the sport, turning up probably every day of the week if they could, but at least on a weekly basis, to buying a ticket and to tuning in, then we'll be far more excited. We'll excite far more brands, and our proposition will be far more compelling. Now, in that, it's really dependent on us and how we drive forward our product. And probably, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about Claire's new role later on and things. But we know that to be attractive, we have to offer experiences that people want to buy, that fans and customers want to consume. So we've got some work to do around improving our product. That's both a challenge and an opportunity. And one of the very reasons we've invested in the new managing director of Super League role that Claire's coming in to fulfill. So it's a time of real excitement, and it is beyond any other time our opportunity to get that momentum in terms of funding coming into our sports.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. The participation figures are staggering. And actually what strikes me from what you've just said is that every single person, whether you work for England Netball, whether you work for Netball Scotland, or you're just playing down your local league, every person can contribute to our success by watching the game, by buying a ticket, by talking about it, by sharing with a friend. And actually, it really is a huge collaborative effort. But one of those key growth areas, as you say, is around participation. You mentioned some figures there. We know with membership as well, England Netball have well over 100,000 members now. In Scotland in 2022, I think it was just around the sort of 9,000, 10,000 mark, similar for Wales as well. And going back to sort of women's sport as a whole, football, of course, women's football has seen incredible growth in recent years. Arsenal are currently on course to break UK attendance records for Women's Champions League game with 52,000 tickets sold. So with this kind of notion in mind that people really do need to play a part, and with the success of women's football, what learnings can we take from them and from that sport, and how can we communicate that message to our fans? I'll come to you for that one, Claire.
Yeah, I think just building on this as well. So absolutely, it always comes down to women need to change the system. Like, we're responsible for everything. So yes, we need our fans to show up. We need our participants to be fans. But actually, let's look at the system and let's look at what COVID did. COVID disproportionately impacted women and girls. Women are twice as likely to suffer mental health issues as a result of that. Women took on the burden and responsibility of care and childcare. So you look at that, and then you look at the intersectional breakdown of women and girls and how we're reaching them. And then we look at, actually, women's sport still isn't visible enough. It's still not invested enough. The opportunities aren't there. We're looking at, actually, the impact of COVID is now going to start getting bigger, because particularly here in Scotland, leisure trusts are in crisis. So accessibility to sports halls are closing down, schools are reducing their accessibility. So yes, we need people to show up. I want to listen to our fans and understand what is going to make them a fan of our product. But actually, a lot of women and girls, that play our sport do so because that's their joy. That's their breakaway from life and home, and it's their little bit of fun. So when the system's broken, COVID has hurt us a little bit more. And now we're saying, look, we need you now, because fan power is what monetizes and commercializes our sport and drives that growth. We need actually support and investment from those brands, from governments, from broadcasters, from partners, from strategic allies to help give sport, women's sport, and in particular netball, because football has had great success, but it is still backed and underpinned by the most powerful and financially, commercially powerful sport in the world. We need help. And so we are full of women like ourselves who will drive the charge and create a product to move forward into this era of opportunity. But we need people to come with us on this journey, because I truly believe that netball has the power to drive the greatest impact for women and girls on the sporting stage. It is unapologetically for and by women. We can design the blueprint for what women's sport looks like at a professional and a participation level. And we can use that to drive real, meaningful, sustainable change, but we can't do it alone. So this is going to need a collective effort. But as Fran said, right now, the easiest thing we can all do is put it onto YouTube, put it onto Sky, click and follow, and buy a ticket, particularly where teams are hosting games in arenas, because that costs a lot of money for a club. And that's our opportunity to fill it, to showcase it, and for us to be able to reinvest in back in what we're doing.
Yeah, I feel this conversation comes up a lot of the time when we have conversations on the podcast around progress and developing the sport. There's this real chicken and egg situation in terms of funding, and we've spoken a lot about how it's difficult to get funding without the proven successful product, but you can't always reach that potential of an initiative without the financial backing as well. So Fran, we'll come back to you for this one. We read in an interview that one of your aims coming into the role was to reduce the reliance on grants. And in 2022, it was announced that England Netball will receive 21.2 million in funding from Sport England over the next 5 years. So how do we convince those brands and sponsors, like Claire mentioned, that we need to come on the journey with us to part with their money? And how much of your role is focused on trying to obtain that major income?
I think Claire's smiling at this one, and I think it's a huge part of our role as CEOs across all the home nations. One of the biggest things that we're responsible for is generating the cash. And ultimately, if we don't bring in the revenues that we need the business to function on, then we can't realise our strategy. And we have a really aggressively ambitious strategy. As part of COVID, as England Netball, we launched something called the Adventure Strategy, where most governing bodies were locking down and going into self-preservation mode. We decided to look ahead and future gains 10 years and called it an adventure strategy. So I think the first thing to say about a CEO and in terms of strategic planning, you have to dream big and you have to back your sport. And I think hopefully you can hear from my passion and Claire's passion that we truly believe that we have something that's meaningful, that can not just deliver against our own ambitions, but can take partners to new levels of visibility, can reach audiences that they can't reach. And what you have to do is work hard to seek out the right partnerships and be clever and smart about who you partner with. Because if you get it right, you can reach audiences that you just can't reach alone. in terms of the makeup of finances of a governing body, so as England Netball, about 40% of our money comes from grant funding from government. So that 21 million that you referenced is our investment from government, from Sport England, for the 5 years ahead. But 60% of our revenues come from what we generate internally. So the majority of that comes from ticketing, membership, sponsorship, broadcast. And as a CEO, you front quite a lot of that. And particularly in some of the smaller nations, Claire will front all of that. So it's both, it's a challenge, but actually it's fantastic. It's one of the parts of the role that I really enjoy. You get to go out and showcase your sport in all its glory and celebrate and share the ambitions. And in the event strategy, we have some really we're really ambitious. And part of that is around professionalising the sport and the product. And as Claire said, making it far more visible than it is now. And there will be a brand that we find that has a belief in that gives you the ability to catapult that visibility beyond what you can do alone. So I think it's really important to be ambitious, and it's really important to have a clear strategy to be able to sell the sport. And in effect, what we're doing at the moment is selling 3 different parts of the sport. You have a participation side of the game that's really important. So from 5 to 95, we want anyone to be involved that can be and that has a desire to be involved in this game. And we want to offer an opportunity to them. And we've got to have different diverse offers for them. And then you've got a Super League, which is your domestic vehicle to really drive forward the professionalisation of the game. And our ambition is to drive careers on and off the court, to have the world-leading domestic women's sport property, and also the world-leading netball league in the world in the years to come. And then at the elite level of the game, we've got a fantastic Roses team that are all role models and leaders in their own right. And it's really easy to sell them because they have their own personal voices. They have their own personal ambitions to add to our ambitious strategy. So you can celebrate them when you go in to speak to brands, or you go in and speak to broadcasters. So it's actually quite a nice part of the job. It takes a big chunk of time, but it's definitely rewarding when you find that partnership that works. And both Sport England and Sky and Vitality are really good examples of partners that have been with us for the whole time that I've been in post within England Netball, and I hope for a long time to come too.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as much as people often like to gripe about Sky, like broadcast issues, whatever, but actually they have backed our sport for a long time, and they really have been at the forefront of it. So that we have to give credit where credit's due and give them their props for that. But something that strikes me from what you've said is around this collaborative effort. And actually, I think more organizations and businesses are moving to become more purpose-led. And it is around finding that the right organization that really speaks to your values and your culture. And actually, it's through that collaboration that we can take this, not just the sport, but also their exposure and their perception to the public to new heights. And this idea of collaboration is something that's really fascinating. And we actually had a number of questions come in from listeners about this. So, Fran, I'll come back to you again. One of our listeners, Jude, asks, how is England Netball, or does England Netball help the other home nations to develop, obviously given their differences in size? Is there collaboration between home nation and GBs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think COVID drove this further forward, actually. We collaborated not just across home nations, but across nations across the world. But absolutely. But I don't think it's always England leading the way. I think we, off the court, we might be competitors on the court, but off the court, we work really closely together as a group of home nations. So myself, Claire, Vicky previously, Sarah in the Wales position, and Karen in Northern Ireland. We had regular conversations through COVID. We shared what was working in our areas. We shared ideas to return the game sooner. Previously, we have collaborated and combined on a membership initiative to drive members to return to the game after the pandemic. We've collaborated around coaching, around officiating, around a number of the areas that support the game to thrive. But as I said, it's not always England leading the way. Claire will come to the table with an initiative that she really thinks can fly, as will Vicky. And I think we work really well together, actually, as a group of home nation CEOs.
Yeah. Sorry, Claire, were you going to say something on that?
Yeah, I was just going to build on that. I guess sort of sharing again some kind of confidences about our journey, or my journey as chief exec. Actually, when I joined, it wasn't like that. We weren't particularly connected as home nations, and it was a little bit fractious maybe across the region. And I have always felt that the only way you can move forward is together. And as I said, as a sport, we compete on the court. But so I've worked really, really hard in my role to build trust and strong relations. Fran's predecessor, Jo Adams, once called me Miss United Nations. She was like, here she is, trying. But we had to find solutions together. And that has really stood us in good stead through things like COVID. But even now, we're working together, actually the kind of Celtic nations. We're looking at how we can be stronger and better on the world stage and what that looks like. So we're looking at how we can create more and better competition, not just at that open level, but our age group level. How are we creating more and better meaningful pressurized competition for our coaches, for our players, so that we can strengthen the product when we get to world events. So we're developing, and we work really closely with Netball or Europe Netball on that to be really strategic. Then we will engage with England about how that can help and support them, what that looks like. We're looking at shared delivery models, being really innovative about a strategic approach that helps us all as a region, as UK Netball, to grow and develop on the world stage, and what those properties look like. And certainly in my new role as well, it's everything should be aligned. How does our domestic league fit in an international competition window? But also, what are those products? How are we creating exciting, innovative products for fans to get involved with? How is that strengthening the talent pool? How is that helping our pathways? How is that helping our officials? So we're really smart about how we work together on this stuff.
I mean, that's absolutely music to my ears. And there was a phrase that you said there, I can't remember exactly how you put it now, about UK netball. And I think a sort of an offshoot of this discussion is around the unification of the home nations. And obviously we've talked about the Olympics, where it's Team GB that competes rather than individual nations separately. Out of curiosity, has there ever been any conversation about an allied UK netball governing body of sorts, Claire? I don't know.
Not a governing body, but certainly, the Olympic conversation comes up all the time, and what that would mean for us at the moment. And, World Netball needs to have a clear strategy over where we're going as a sport, what our world competition looks like, what our products and properties are, why we're doing things, how, we want to get more nations involved. We want to grow the global footprint and the power of the sport, but it's got to be done properly and strategically. So it's always a conversation, and it's always there, but it's not something at this moment in time that we're building a strategy around. But certainly, things, ideas, we try and be quite innovative when, we've talked about previously being able to put some international competition on that really helps the Roses. Can we pull together a sort of best of the rest of UK team? And we might see these things in the future, and we try to be innovative. But at this moment in time, we've got 4 strong nations who need to keep performing and moving up the rankings and being more dominant in world netball.
No, that's really fascinating. Obviously, there is another layer to it in terms of world netball and the global game. And we actually had a question from Amy on Instagram on this. So, Fran, can you talk us through the role that you play as CEO with regards to world netball and inputting as member nations into global netball planning and development?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if all the listeners will be aware of this, but World Netball are actually based in England. They're up in Manchester. So thankfully, it enables us to have a really close working relationship with them, and we correspond with them on a really regular basis, actually. But in basic governance terms, so Netball Scotland, England Netball are members of World Netball. So that gives us the ability to really influence change on a global level. So we'll have votes on things like the membership of the board and of the committees. So we are collectively responsible for appointing the people with the best skills to drive our sport forward on a world level. We'll be consultees on things like medical regulations, World Cup. We obviously worked really closely with World Netball on the World Cup in 2019 in Liverpool. And we also buddy up with other less developed nations to help them grow. So in the run up to 2019, we did some really amazing work actually out in Zambia and in Argentina to help them develop their infrastructures. And then there's, I personally sit on a number of working groups globally for World Netball, looking at the broader, more strategic, longer term growth of the sport. So we know we've got work to do around the visibility of the game in the UK, but equally, if we can unlock some of those powerhouse territories, the States, there's good work going on there, but there's far more that could be done. India is another example of that. So we meet as a working group to look at other territories and what new products it could take to activate those territories. Because if we grow our whole global game, that will undoubtedly benefit the UK and the growth of the sport here. So there's lots of dialogue. I regularly meet with Australia and New Zealand to look at calendars. Is probably the hot topic we debate the most. I don't know if we'll ever get to complete calendar alignment, but by God, we've been trying in the background.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I had absolutely no idea about the work that you do with Argentina and Zambia. I think that's absolutely incredible. But that's something that people don't know about. It'd be great if we could sort of start to share those stories a little bit more and kind of what that collaboration looks like. There's sort of so much great work going on behind the scenes. And sort of speaking of World Netball, and we've touched on the Olympics as well. A huge growth area for netball around the globe is around men's and mixed netball. In Scotland, of course, Highland Fever have become the first men's club and are competing with top domestic clubs as an invitational entry into the inaugural National League. We know in England, we've got a formal partnership now with England Men's and Mixed Netball Association, which is amazing. Fran, in England Netball strategy, there is, of course, great emphasis on being unapologetically and unashamedly female focused, but there's also this really strong desire to embrace and support the growth of the men's game. So how do you sort of balance the two and ensure that both of those ambitions complement each other and make sure that netball's somewhat limited resources aren't stretched too thin?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's actually a question I get asked quite frequently. So the way I try to explain it is, right now in this country and across the UK, there is a huge gender gap in sport. So there's approximately 2 million less women than men that are meeting the Chief Medical Officer's recommendations for activity to class as being active each week. So what we care really passionately about is changing that. And I guess netball, as a previously female-focused sport, has a real potential to change the game. And over the last decade or so, we've been the sport that has been shifting that dial and closing that participation gap. Going back to 2012, when we hosted the Olympics here, actually the fastest growing sport in this country in 2012 was netball, because we started to create an opportunity for people to play back to netball, walking netball, and kept them involved for life. So it's something we do well, and it is one of the reasons that we get the funding levels of funding we do from Sport England. So our unapologetically female focus is because we passionately believe we can make a change for women's sport and we can close that gender gap. And sometimes the best way to do that is to be really female focused and promote your sport in that way, because we know mixed and male sports can be off-putting to people that haven't participated in activity for a length of time. But having said all that, we want our sport to grow and to thrive, and we want anyone that wants to be involved in the game to be able to find a place in the game. So when EMNA, and it was Ryan, actually president of EMNA, that approached me just pre-pandemic, and we'd had a number of approaches in my role as development director going back kind of 12, 13 years from other people heading up men's netball or England men's netball teams. But never had we had someone that came to us with such a plan that Ryan did. He came and he shared his vision for men's sport in England, men's netball in England. He was with Lewis at the time, and he introduced us then over the next year to their committee, who've got a huge array of different skills and a real drive and passion as well. And in EMNA, what we found is an organisation that we believed we could really support, we could partner with, and we could help them grow to address this fact that we weren't able to spread our resource, because it's quite finite, across both the men's game and the women's game. So what this allows us to do is to be really unapologetically female focused and devote the resource that we have coming into England Netball towards the female game, but also lend our expertise, our skills, our insight, our knowledge from growing the women's game to EMNA to grow that mixed game, that men's game. And by God, they're doing a phenomenal job in the couple of years. And remembering that a couple of those years are pandemic years, they have moved mountains, that there are boys and men's netball clubs popping up all around the country. The national championships I've had the honour of attending the last couple of years, it is thriving. The competition across home nations now in men's netball is brilliant. And last year I went out to New Zealand to see the Fast Fives and support Ryan and the team on the international stage. And just to have men's netball played on that international stage gives you an idea of how far it's come. So I believe you can balance it. I believe there's nothing wrong in saying we're unapologetically female, but actually we really want to involve everyone we can in the game. And we don't have to divide our resource too thinly in that respect. So I think we're proud of both now.
Yeah. And how powerful is that, though, for just tackling general gender stereotypes in itself? You know, when we're still seeing that it is so hard still for men to come out in football, and you've got this massive platform, and yet it's still not inclusive, it's still not representative, it's still not a safe space. And here we are fighting this you know, on this mission, flying the flag for women, absolutely looking at closing that gender participation gap. Our new strategy is called Closing the Gap, but actually also taking a traditional female sport and making it accessible and safe and fun and credible for men and boys as well. And I think that is what we're bringing to the table here, that we can do both, but we can do both very powerfully.
I love that. I think it's this whole thing of growing the pie rather than deciding who's taking what slice. It's saying, actually, we want a bigger pie. We want to be the biggest sport. We want to make sure that everyone feels welcome in netball. And I think it's so uniquely placed. I think there's been a lot of work as well being done around inclusion. There's a Unicorns Netball Club in London, which is LGBTQ plus players. And I've been seeing some really good stuff that they're doing. And netball's so uniquely placed to really champion all kinds of inclusivity and diversity, which is fantastic to see. And you alluded to it earlier in just looping back to the kind of international representation from England and Scotland and how they kind of perform on the international stage and the impact that has. So you're obviously very invested in the success of your respective national teams, and that has a massive knock-on effect in terms of participation and the profile of netball in each country. So Fran, the historic gold medal win in 2018, which we will never stop going on about on the podcast. We mention it pretty much every week. It was extremely significant, of course, for the sport. However, we then weren't able to repeat the success again in 2022. When you took over the role, you said one of your aims was for England to reach that #1 world ranking. We're currently in third and 26 points behind Australia in first, with Jamaica nipping at our heels. So how do you ensure that the wider sport continues to develop and build when you perhaps don't have that real pinnacle national success to act as a springboard?
Yeah, and good question. And what I'm reminded of really regularly by our performance team is when you're trying to smash through glass ceilings and you're trying to get from what was quite a long way back to consistent world performance, top of that podium. It's a wiggly road to that consistent level of dominating world tournaments. And I think the shift and the gear change that we've gone on through the last decade or so with the national team, with the Roses team, has shown that we've really broken down that for so many years, the Southern Hemisphere dominated. It was not even expected that anyone would break into a final. Now it's expected. And I love the belief and the passion of our fans that are desperately disappointed every time we don't get into a final, because we're that close. So you look at the Australia tour last year, you know, that first match losing by 1 goal and the others being tremendously close. We are so close. And the winning margins are getting smaller and smaller. And in terms of the global game, with Jamaica progressing in the way they are and South Africa coming back to the fore, then it's a great place to be in netball. Now, there's going to be disappointment and there's going to be heartbreak. And we absolutely felt that, none more so than the Roses team last year in Birmingham. But it will make them come back stronger. And I think what we do need to remind ourselves regularly is of that progress in that time. You know, after that gold medal win, we might have narrowly missed out in 2019, but it was a fantastic event. And shortly after that, during the pandemic, the Roses were the first team that put their hand up and said, we'll take to the air and we're going to fight to give ourselves the best possible international opportunities. We were the first country to host a multi-international test series after the pandemic, and we carved out more opportunities at personal sacrifice of the Roses to play top opposition. And we beat New Zealand in a test match for the first time during the pandemic. We've had back-to-back wins now against Jamaica, and we've seen great debuts of new, fresh talent coming through both the Uganda series and the Jamaica series. So I feel really confident about the future. It might not happen immediately. You know, we never thought we were going to go from 3rd to 1 in the world in a couple of years. That absolutely, when I made those statements, that wasn't in my mind. This is a 10-year journey. But the only way we will succeed in doing that is if we elevate our domestic game. So I come back to the decisions that we make quite regularly and the venture strategy and the professionalisation element of it. And if we invest the 3rd highest amount in our domestic game, if we drive the 3rd highest level of revenues, we will net out more often than not 3rd in the world. And that's pretty much, as you said, from the world rankings, Lucy, that's where we are. So we've got to make some game-changing shifts. And bringing Claire into the MD role for Super League, we announced last week we're bringing Mark Foster from Rugby League into Chief Commercial Officer's role. What we intend to do by doing that is drive the revenues into the domestic game, be that ticketing, broadcast, sponsorship, whatever it is. That revenue can then flow down into the Super League. The Super League can then elevate the salaries of players within the league. We can put on a better product for the fans. We can create far more compelling experiences, and we can start to innovate. And when we do that, our performances won't just increase on the domestic front in terms of Super League. That will act as a platform for the players in the Roses squad to ply their trade. Hopefully, it will give the Roses the choice to stay here and not every time they get compelling offer, jump on a plane and go down to SSN or ANZ, which I have to say are doing a brilliant job and looking after our athletes really well. But we want it to be a choice for our athletes to stay and play in this country. So in bringing in Claire's role, it almost signifies our commitment to the Super League, not just for the international game, but to grow the visibility of the whole sport. And I think that is eventually what will get us back to number 1 in the world. So keep the faith would be my message.
Yeah, it's very true. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. Sometimes these things do take an enormous amount of time. And we do want to ask you, Fran, about a bit more in detail about the role. And you've done a lovely segue there for us talking about the Super League. But Claire, obviously, congratulations, first of all, on the new role. We have announced, for anyone who's been hiding under a rock, you are going to be taking over as the managing director of the Super League in later on in this year in June, and you're obviously taking on this role at a really exciting time for women's sport as a whole, and particularly netball. With this being a brand new role, you have a really good opportunity to make your mark and lead us into a new era for the sport. And we all know that there is a huge task ahead of us to professionalise the game in the UK and bridge the gap between the Netball Super League and the SSN and ANZ competitions. Do you ever feel daunted at the enormity of the task ahead?
Well, I did when I was looking at the comments last week and everyone was like, great, Claire's here. She's going to solve everything. And I was like... Okay, I love her. And actually, thank you to everyone, because I have to say, I was saying before this, I was really nervous about the announcement and how it would be received, and I was absolutely blown away by the positivity from the netball family. So thank you for that. But it's a huge task because of where we are and where we want to get to. But we are going to do this properly. and we're going to build something that is sustainable and is successful for the future and for many years to come, that has the opportunity to grow, to diversify, to continue to innovate, and to lead the way in our sport. And all those things that Fran was talking about reaching new territories and taking the sport wider. We want the Super League to be a real driving force in shaping and influencing that. But to do that, we need to make sure we have the foundations right in place, that we have the right infrastructure, the right people, the right partners and funding, that we're clear on our roadmap on what success measures we're putting in place and how we do that. And we need to make sure that we do it as a collective. That's fans, clubs, players, coaches, partners, that we move this forward together. I'm very innovative. I'm very creative. I want to try new things. I talk about all the time that I don't just want to be a tournament organizer. I'm not coming in here to do a nice 5-month competition. I'm here to create a global brand, an annualized product and proposition, something that really can drive careers, professional careers in sport forward, but is also doing far more across the business of sport, the impact of women's sport, linking back to all those challenges we've been talking about. If we get this right, we can make a difference and shape that. So yes, it's huge, but we are everyone you talk to, and even when I love hearing the challenges from fans or clubs or players, because that helps us grow. But it's by listening to these and for us all working together to drive this forward that we'll be able to get where we need to go. And so everyone has SSN up there, and they're wonderful. I love what they do, and there's a lot that we'll learn from. But we have an absolute blank canvas here, a blank canvas to write what not only netball looks like at a professional level, but what women's sport looks like. And so we are going to take all the best bits from all the best sports, but we're also going to bring our own passion and ideas in this, and hopefully create something really exciting, really innovative, and something that inspires all these young people and future fans for many, many years to come.
I mean, I'm just so excited already. Like, honestly, cannot wait. And obviously, there's not a lot that you'll be able to say at this moment in time because you haven't even started the role. So we've already got you booked in our diary for another episode later down the line, where we'll be able to talk about things in much more detail. Broadcast, clubs, all that kind of stuff. So listeners, there's lots coming your way. But Fran, we wanted to come to you and get your perspective on this. Why did you feel that now was kind of the right time to put this kind of post in place? And why is Claire the right person for the job?
Oh,
there'll be a ego stroking about to happen now.
So why now? Well, I think if I rewind back a couple of years, so we when I took over this role, we took a long, hard look at the Super League. And we toyed around with lots of different decisions, lots of different scenarios about how we drove the league forward. And I think we announced publicly a couple of years ago that we were partnering with Rothschild Financial Management Services to go out and to look at private equity and to look at whether we sought investment into the league externally. And in truth, we did that. We went out, we've had lots of conversations over the last couple of years, and we've made connections across a number of other sports. And as Claire said, we've learned lots of lessons, spent time with cricket and learnt about their development of the 100. And there was quite a lot of interest, though. There was quite a lot of interest from investors, and there was offers that came forward. And I think the decision we got to as a Super League board, and both myself and Claire sit on that Super League board together at the moment. And the decision we made really as a Super League board, as an England Netball board, is there is an ability to probably gain funding now from external investment. But actually, if we inserted our own resource and aggressively went out to the market with the vision and the ambition we have and drove our own commercial revenues, we could potentially go back and access more money from investment in the future, or we may be able to do it alone and be far more in charge of our own destiny. So we're not closing the door on investment, but we actually believe that we should back ourselves, inject more capital, inject more resource into the sport, And the managing director role was one of the ways in which we have intended and do intend to drive that forward. So in introducing the role, it is only the first role that we plan to introduce. Over the period of the next 10 years, we want to build out a more aggressive, dedicated team in this space. We need to look at the governance structure of Super League. And on that roadmap that Claire alluded to, there will be other changes, there will be other announcements that we're able to make, some in the short term and some in the slightly longer term. But we think we've got a clear vision, we think we've got a clear roadmap, and we are absolutely convinced that Claire is the right person to come in and drive that roadmap forward. She's been crucial to all of the professionalisation conversations we've had over the last couple of years. She's been an integral member of the Super League board. And you just have to look at what Scotland have achieved and what Sirens have achieved to give evidence to the reason of the appointment. She's madly passionate, as I'm sure everyone that's listening to this podcast will now realise, if they hadn't already.
She's ambitious. On.
But she's also like a bit like a dog with a bone. So if you give her a challenge, she's not going to let go of that. We know she will fight to drive this sport forward, to drive this league forward. And with a background in commercial, in brand, in marketing, and in partnership development, those are all the things that are going to be integral to us as a sport over the next couple of years. We are absolutely thrilled to have Claire on board. We can't wait for her to get started. And I think you'll see some really exciting developments from the league with Claire pushing that forward over the next 12 months or so.
Yes, we are equally thrilled. Honestly, my jaw dropped to the floor when I read that. And I just felt almost instantly, not to put even more pressure on you, Claire, but I felt kind of instantly like our sport was in very safe hands. And like Lucy said earlier, Rome is not built in a day. And I don't expect us to be a fully professional sport by 2024. Like that just will not happen. But I have no question that we absolutely will get there with Claire, with you, Fran, and with the sort of infrastructure that is going to be built around it. But Claire, we've spoken about our fan base a couple of times throughout this conversation. We know we have a hugely passionate fan base who are unafraid to continually question the status quo and really are passionate about pushing our sport forward. So how do you kind of manage the weight of this and the associated pressures that come with the expectations of the netball family?
Well, going back to what I said my innate values are and my drivers and motivators, I feel it's a privilege and it's a responsibility that I now have to be able to shape our sport for the future, for the better. And everything I do, and look, we might not, we're going to have to make some difficult decisions, and there might be things that not everyone agrees with along the way. But I think I was just reflecting on your reaction that you said when you found out I got the post. A number of people across our sport in quite key roles said the same thing. They felt that this was a good appointment because they trusted me and they feel like the sport's in safe hands. So I will tell you that I will push things, and I like to be a little bit pioneering, and I'll do things different sometimes. There will be difficult decisions. But if people can trust that the reasons why we're doing things is for the betterment of the sport, because it's connected and locked into a bigger vision and a bigger picture, and there's that backing and buy-in. And I will be as transparent and open as possible. I have my approach will be very much to try and take people on the journey and to make sure that I'm listening and that they're feeding into this. But if there's trust and if there's openness, then it means that we can navigate what lies ahead as a collective. So yeah, there's I feel a lot of pressure, but this is what everyone's been asking for. So let's go and do it. And I will be coming to the fans to ask them for their advice and feedback. I'll be asking them to show up. I'll be asking them to bring their friends along, because even if someone came and wrote us a huge check tomorrow and we said we're going to put netball in every single arena, if those seats are empty, then we don't go forward as a sport. So this will be about building a product that fans buy into and that allows us to commercialize and monetize better. And that will be digitally on at courtside, watching at home, but also how we engage as a sport across our socials. So yeah, for me and Fran talk about this a lot. It's all tactics. It's what do we do first? when and why. And that's the bit that when you are a limited lean resource, we have to be really smart on how we do that. And that will be the neat trick that we'll work on. But if everyone trusts us and trusts that we are doing the right thing for the sport and its people and our people, then, you know, hopefully it will make these challenges a little bit easier to get through.
Yeah, absolutely. The two words you've said are trust and openness. And I think actually as a sport, yeah, probably a little bit brave of me to say this to two CEOs, but that's possibly something where we've fallen down as a sport before, and we haven't perhaps built that trust with our fan base or had that level of openness that I do not believe that fans should know every single detail about everything. Like, that's just not the way the world works. But I think there's a level of openness that we as a sport haven't had, that we've probably just missed the mark on. So I think,
look, we know that, Lucy, we know that. But I think we don't get everything right at all. But as hopefully this is probably one of our most candid interviews that we've done as chief execs. What we've had to try and navigate through, the complexities of our businesses, the scale of business that we have, you know, everything that we're trying to manage. Sometimes we're just making decisions and we're just getting on with it, and we're reacting and we're firefighting, and there's something new, and everything from HR, finance, operations, performance, participation, you know, partnerships. We're working across all these things. So if it's not coming out, it's not that we're trying to be secretive. It's just that we are in often survival mode. But my commitment in this role is that I'm going to take people on a journey. And I think if anyone knows me as a chief exec at Netball Scotland and Sirens, I'm hugely accessible. I walk around, I talk to people, I listen, I make sure that people feel like they can come and talk to me. And I built that relationship across our sport. So there'll be times when I'll say, we can't share that, but moving forward, as Fran said, she's made this appointment. England Netball have done that so that the Super League clubs and fans have someone to lead and to be transparent and open and accessible to the sport.
100%. And we only see not even half, we see a fraction of what goes on behind the scenes. So, you know, we are so grateful to both of you and to Vicky last week for being so candid and for sharing so much. And obviously there's not a huge amount of detail we can go into until you start the role. But to have this opportunity to speak to you and for our fans to hear from you both, I think has been absolutely amazing. And, you know, it's not something that we've previously had access to globally. Like, you know, this is really pioneering stuff. So thank you so much to both of you. Fran, I just want to throw to you for any final remarks.
Just one thing that I haven't mentioned that I feel that I really want to depart on probably. So during COVID, it's been tough. It's been incredibly tough for a number of sports. But I am so proud of how the netball family has joined together to save this sport, and absolutely save the sport are the right words to use, because at one point there was a chance that we weren't getting through that pandemic. Yeah. And through the Rise Again campaign, you know, that 75% of members paid their membership fee when there was no promise of any netball. 2,500 COVID officers said, we'll come and help return the sport. The members put up with the modified game. Let's hope we never have to bring it back. Broadcasters pulled together to put the sport in a TV studio and show every single match. You know, that there has been a collaborative approach. The Super League and where we are now is absolute testament to the netball family, because we are as a sport now thriving. We've come through, we've recovered, we've reimagined the sport, and we're in a really exciting position now. You know, the Super League last season, we're saying we need to make change, but it was the most attended, the most watched, the most engaged season we've ever had, thanks to all of those clubs that did a tremendous job at returning it to a home and away basis. That there's so many things that we should be grateful for. And the one thing I guess I'll leave on is, during the pandemic, there was a piece of research that was done that said the two sports most impacted in the UK by the pandemic were skiing and netball. And that scared the life out of me when that was produced during the pandemic. That same piece of research was republished, updated and republished last week. And we're talking about the Active Live survey. And what it showed us last week is that netball has returned to the largest female participation sport for adults, weekly, fortnightly, and on an annual basis, above all of the rest, including football. So we've overtaken football in a time where we've had incredible challenges. And we are now the third most participated team sport of men and women combined. So we've overtaken, we've overtaken basketball, and we've overtaken rugby union. And that would not have been possible without the whole netball family pulling together and backing the sport they loved. So I do believe we've got a really loyal fan base. I hope they trust me and Claire to take us into this next decade of adventure, because we will do our best to make the right choices and to keep their loyalty and to continue this incredible journey that we've been on. So just leaving with a tremendous thank you. The netball family is a very, very special family.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, what a perfect way to end. Really inspirational note to finish on. So just from us and from the netball family, thank you both so much for your time. We know you're incredibly busy women.
Not at all. I look forward to coming on in a few weeks to talk about Super League next steps, and hopefully share a bit more detail as well. But between them, we've got loads of fixtures, so tune in and show up, please.
Yeah.
Get your tickets, people. Loose.
I'm fully speechless at the fact that we got to have that conversation with two women who are so inspiring and so pioneering for our game. To hear them speak so openly and honestly about the state of the game, but in reality, where we are now, what challenges we faced, the impact of COVID, specifically Fran mentioning, that about how the members saved our game. It could be wildly different if we didn't have these leaders in position, and we trust them, or we have to trust them an enormous amount, because they have the responsibility. What's the word that keeps coming to me is guardian. Like they are the guardians of our sport. And we have to allow them and trust them to get on with it while still challenging things and giving our perspective. And I liked what Claire said about listening to the fans and hearing that, but knowing that they have the wider vision and the wider strategy for netball in the front of their minds is really critical. I thought it was a fascinating listen.
Yeah, really fascinating. And to have that level of access to three CEOs, actually, if we include part one as well, like I feel so privileged to be able to have these conversations. And actually, I have to pay my respects to all of them, because there are some difficult questions in there around like how they're going to steer the ship for our sport, and some uncomfortable questions around, building that trust and that transparency with the netball family, which we haven't historically as a sport been particularly great at. But to welcome that challenge and to be able to have those conversations with us and to trust us actually to be able to have that conversation. I feel incredibly honoured, privileged, inspired.
I think we've done a lot of good episodes, but I think these are probably up there in terms of the impact of the sport from the real top level. Get, that insight. I think this is, this has been one of my most enjoyable episodes to make, I think.
Yeah, got to be up there, top 10 for sure. I mean, hope you guys have enjoyed that as much as we have. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of Qtr Time. We genuinely cannot wait to bring you more netball chat and another super special guest next week.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media at Qtr Time Pod for the latest netball updates. Do get involved in the conversation online by letting us know what you thought of the matches this weekend, which players have stood out for you, what you thought of this conversation as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your feedback, and any questions that have come up for you from listening to this. Please do send them in. And it's a big old doubleheader this weekend, so get ready for that as well. Clear your diaries, I would say, is my advice.
Absolutely. We'd also really appreciate it if you could just take a moment to rate and review, as it does honestly help other people to find the podcast. If you enjoy listening to the pod, do let us know. If you don't want to hear from you, and do stop joking, all feedback received. But do
and some thrown in the bin. We've actually never received any. Oh God, we're opening ourselves up to criticism now.
Let's not say that.
Okay, no, I won't say that. We have never received any hate mail So that means we're probably doing something good.
I hope so. Or they're just very nice people.
Or we haven't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But genuinely, like the more we talk about stuff like this, the more we share our game with our friends and family, like Claire and Fran said, the bigger it will get. And that is actually what our sport depends on to grow. Don't forget as well, for our lovely listeners, there's an exclusive 15% discount with Lovell Netball. Just enter the code NETPOD15 at the checkout at lovellnetball.co.uk. Oh, deep breath. Right. Take care, everyone, and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.